Stop scrolling. I need you to hear this, because what I'm about to tell you is the kind of story that makes you question everything you think you know about family, failure, and what it really means to succeed. My name? Emily Carter. I'm 43 years old. I live in Seattle. I run a foundation that has treated over 40,000 patients in the last 5 years. And the two people who made me feel like the biggest failure on the planet, they walked through my hospital doors needing me to save their lives. Not metaphorically, literally. My name, Emily Carter, was carved in marble above the entrance of the building where my parents came for treatment. Now, let me be very clear about something before I tell you this story. This is not a revenge story. I know that's what the title sounds like. I know that's what you're expecting. But the truth is so much more complicated than revenge, so much more painful, and, honestly, so much more beautiful. Because this story is really about one question that I carried for 20 years like a stone in my chest. Was I ever actually worth something? And the answer I finally got broke me open in a way I was not prepared for. Stay with me, because this is going to take a while, and every single minute is worth it. To understand what happened, you need to understand the family I grew up in. The Carters were not wealthy, but we were proud. My father, Robert Carter, was a self-made man. He'd grown up poor in rural Ohio, worked 3 jobs to put himself through college, and built a career as a civil engineer. He was disciplined, sharp, and absolutely relentless. He had one philosophy about life, and he repeated it so often I could hear it in my sleep. Failure is a choice. Winners don't make excuses, they make results. My mother, Patricia, was a high school principal, brilliant woman, organized, respected in our community. She had her own version of my father's philosophy. In this family, we don't quit, we don't make excuses, and we certainly don't embarrass ourselves. They were good parents in many ways. I want to be fair about that. We always had food on the table. We had structure. We had discipline. What we didn't have was room to be human. My older brother, Daniel, was their golden child, valedictorian, full scholarship to Northwestern, pre-med track. He was everything they had dreamed of producing. Then there was me. Emily, the one who drew pictures in the margins of her textbooks, the one who stayed up late writing stories instead of studying, the one who wanted to be different. I loved people. I loved understanding them. I wanted to study psychology and eventually work in healthcare, not as a doctor, but in hospital administration, building systems that actually helped people navigate the worst moments of their lives. To my parents, that sounded like code for, I want to do something soft and useless. My father said it plainly one evening at dinner when I was 17. Emily, psychology is for people who can't handle real work. You're going to pre-med, you're going to become a doctor, and that's the end of this conversation. My mother nodded without looking up at her plate, and that was the end of that conversation. For 5 years. I want you to imagine something. Imagine spending 4 years of your life studying something you fundamentally don't connect with, something that your brain resists every single day, not because you're lazy, not because you're stupid, but because every cell in your body is telling you, this is not your path. That was my college experience. I enrolled in pre-med at Ohio State at my parents' insistence. I tried. God, I tried so hard. First year, I passed. Barely, but I passed. Second year, I started slipping. The organic chemistry, the biology labs, and the physics, it wasn't clicking. I was spending 6 hours a day studying and still failing practice exams. Meanwhile, I was secretly taking elective courses in healthcare administration and organizational psychology. Those classes, I was getting A's without even trying. My professors were pulling me aside asking if I'd considered making it my major, but I couldn't tell my parents. So I lived a double life for 2 years, struggling in the classes they chose for me, thriving in the classes I chose for myself. By the middle of my third year, the grades had collapsed completely. I failed 3 core courses. My GPA dropped to a 1.8. I received a letter from the university suggesting I consider changing my academic direction. I sat in my dorm room holding that letter for 3 hours. Then I called home. My father answered. I told him everything: the failing grades, the classes I'd been secretly taking, the fact that I genuinely believed I was in the wrong program. There was silence on the phone for so long I thought he'd hung up. Then he said, and I remember every word, he said, "I have worked my entire life so that my children would never have to struggle the way I did. I sacrificed, my mother sacrificed, and this is what you've done with it?" I tried to explain. I told him about the administration courses. I told him I had a plan. I told him I genuinely believed I could build a career in healthcare management. He held up his hand to stop me. "Healthcare management," he repeated, like the words tasted bad. "You want to push papers while your brother saves lives." My mother finally spoke. She said, "Emily, we've talked. If you're not going back to pre-med, we can't keep supporting you. We won't keep supporting you. We have a reputation in this community. My father has a reputation. We can't have our daughter being—" She stopped herself. But I finished the sentence in my head. A failure. I asked them what they were saying. My father walked to the hallway closet and came back with 2 bags, already packed. He'd packed my bags before I even arrived. He set them by the front door. He said, "If you won't do things the right way, you can figure it out on your own. This house is for people who are trying, not for people who quit." I looked at my mother. She looked at the table. I picked up my bags. I walked out the front door. It was November. It was 38 degrees outside. I sat in my car in their driveway for 15 minutes because I genuinely did not know where to drive. I was 21 years old. I had $340 in my bank account. My friends were all in dorms. My brother, when I texted him, responded with, "Just apologize and go back inside, Em. Don't be dramatic." I started the car. I drove away. And I did not speak to my parents for 11 years. I need to be honest with you about the next 2 years, because this is the part of the story that most people skip over, the part that gets edited out because it's not inspiring or motivational. It was bad, really bad. I couch surfed for 3 months. A college friend named Rachel let me sleep on her sofa and never once made me feel like a burden. I will love her for that until the day I die. I got a job waitressing, then a second job doing data entry on weekends. I ate a lot of instant noodles. I wore the same 4 outfits in rotation. I called in sick to one of my jobs twice because I couldn't afford the gas to get there. There were nights, I'm not going to sugarcoat this, there were nights where I sat on the floor of Rachel's bathroom and genuinely wondered if any of this was worth continuing. Not in a dangerous way, but in that hollow, exhausted way where you just think, what exactly am I fighting for? The worst isn't the poverty. The worst part was the silence from home. No calls, no texts, no checking in. My mother's birthday passed. I sent a card. No response. Thanksgiving came. I spent it at Rachel's family's house, smiling through dinner, excusing myself to cry in their guest bathroom. Christmas? Nothing. That silence was its own kind of damage, because when the people who are supposed to love you most go completely quiet, you start to believe the last thing they said about you. And the last thing they said about me was, "You are not worth supporting." I carried that sentence like a backpack full of rocks for years. Here's what nobody tells you about rock bottom. It has a floor. And when you finally hit it, when you've cried every tear and felt every feeling and sat with every dark thought, something very quiet happens. You get tired of being defeated. Not motivated, not inspired, not suddenly filled with some cinematic surge of confidence. Just tired. Tired of being small. Tired of being broke. Tired of letting the last thing they said about you be the final word. For me, that moment came on a Tuesday in February. I was doing data entry at a medical billing company, completely mindless work, but I was surrounded by healthcare data all day. Insurance claims, hospital billing codes, patient record systems. And I noticed something. The systems were a disaster. Inefficient, confusing, designed by people who clearly had never sat in a waiting room, terrified and overwhelmed. Patients were being billed incorrectly, claims were getting denied for administrative reasons that had nothing to do with medical necessity. I started making notes, just for myself. A little document on my phone where I'd write down everything I saw that was broken and how I would fix it. After 3 months, I had 40 pages of notes. I showed them to my supervisor, a woman named Dr. Linda Marsh. She had a PhD in health administration and had taken a consulting role with our company. She read my notes over lunch break. She looked at me across the table and said, "How old are you?" I said, 23. She said, "Have you considered going back to school for health administration?" I told her the whole story. The pre-med failure, my parents, the bags are by the front door. She listened to every word without interrupting. Then she said something I have repeated to myself almost every day since. "Emily, your parents confused the path with the destination. They wanted you them healthcare. You are in healthcare. You just found a different door." She became my mentor. She helped me apply for a part-time graduate program at Health Services Administration at the University of Washington. She wrote my recommendation letter herself. I got in. I cried for an hour when I opened the acceptance email. What followed was 8 years of building. Not a glamorous building, not an overnight success. Real building. Brick by brick, year by year, setback by setback. I finished my graduate program while working full-time. I graduated with a 3.9 GPA. Then I took a position as an operations coordinator at a mid-size hospital in Seattle. Within 2 years, I was managing 3 departments. Within 4 years, I was the director of patient services. People started noticing, not because I was the loudest person in the room, but because the departments I ran actually worked. Patient satisfaction scores went up. Billing errors went down. Staff turnover dropped. I had a gift for seeing broken systems and fixing them, and I had something else, something that came directly from those years of struggle. I understood what it felt like to be scared and have nobody in your corner. That understanding made me a different kind of leader. I fought for patients the way I wished someone had fought for me. By the time I was 35, I had built enough credibility, connections, and savings to start thinking about something bigger. A dream I'd been sketching in notebooks since that data entry job in my 20s. A healthcare facility built from the ground up around the patient experience. Affordable, accessible, staffed by people who actually gave a damn. I spent 3 years raising funding. I pitched to 34 investors before I got my first yes. I partnered with a nonprofit foundation. I hired an incredible team. And on September 14th, 11 years after my father packed my bags and put them by the front door, the Emily Carter Foundation Hospital opened in Seattle. My name, in marble above the entrance. I stood outside alone the night before the opening, just looking at it. And I thought about that 21-year-old girl in the driveway. I said out loud, to nobody, "We made it." 2 years after the hospital opened, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. When I did, the voice on the other end said, "Emily, it's Daniel." My brother. We had spoken 4 times in 11 years. Brief, awkward exchanges at the edges of other people's lives. His voice sounded different, tight, scared. He said, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear me out before you respond." I said, "Okay." He told me that our father had been diagnosed with a serious cardiac condition 6 months earlier, that he'd been managing it with medication but had recently deteriorated, that he needed a specific intervention procedure. Then he said, he doesn't know it's your hospital. Mom didn't either until I looked it up last night. Dad just knows his doctor recommended it as the best facility in the region for this procedure." More silence. Then he said, quietly, "Mom also needs to be seen. She's been having neurological symptoms for months. She's been scared to go, but if Dad's going to that hospital anyway." He trailed off. I sat with the phone against my ear for a very long time. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment, because it wasn't triumphant, it wasn't satisfying the way you might imagine. It was complicated. There was grief in it, for all the years, for the girl in the driveway, for every holiday that passed in silence. There was fear. What would it feel like to see them? And underneath all of it, underneath the complicated mess of feelings, there was still love. Stubborn, inconvenient, 20 years buried love. I told Daniel to bring them. I said, "Make sure they get the best care we have. I'll make sure of it personally." He started to cry. He said, "I'm sorry too, for not... I'm sorry." I said, "I know. Bring them." I was in my office when they arrived. My assistant knocked and said, "The Carter family is in the main lobby." I took a breath. I took another one. I walked down. The lobby of my hospital has large windows that face west. In the late afternoon, the light comes through golden and warm. We designed it that way on purpose, because I always thought hospitals felt too cold and too harsh, and I wanted the first thing people saw when they walked in to feel like, "You are safe here." My parents were standing near the reception desk. My father looked older than I expected. Smaller somehow, the way strong people sometimes look when their body starts fighting them. He had a cane. His hair was fully white. My mother was holding his arm. She'd always been the composed one, the principal, always put together. But she looked tired in a way that went beyond physical. They were looking around the lobby, and then my father's eyes moved upward, to the wall behind the reception desk where, in large, clean letters, it read, "Emily Carter Foundation Hospital, built with the belief that every person deserves dignified care." I watched his face. I watched the moment he understood. He read the name, then he looked around the lobby, then he read the name again. And then he turned. And he saw me. I was standing 20 feet away in my director's badge and my hospital lanyard. His face did something I had never seen it do in 43 years of being his daughter. It completely collapsed. Not dramatically, not in a movie way, just the walls came down. All of them. All at once. My mother saw me a second later and made a sound I cannot describe. Somewhere between a gasp and a sob. My father took one step toward me, then stopped, like he didn't know if he had the right. He said my name. Just Emily. Not with an explanation attached to it, not with an apology yet. Just my name. Like he was confirming I was real. I walked to him. He hugged me, and this man, this disciplined, stoic, failure is a choice man, he held on to me and shook. My mother's arms came around both of us. We stood there in the lobby of my hospital, the three of us, for a long time. My father's procedure went well. His cardiologist, one of the best in the Pacific Northwest, a woman I had recruited personally 2 years earlier, called it a textbook success. My mother's neurological evaluation identified an early-stage condition that, caught when it was entirely manageable. During the days they were at the hospital, we talked. Real conversations, the kind we never actually had. My father told me about his own father, a man who had beaten failure out of him so brutally that he'd simply never learned another way. He wasn't excusing himself, he was explaining the only origin story he knew. My mother told me she had a folder at home, newspaper clippings, printed articles, anything she'd found over the years with my name on it. She'd been following my career from a distance for a decade, in silence, too proud or too scared or too ashamed to reach out. She said, "I knew you were going to be something. I knew it even when I was too much of a coward to say so." That one took me a while to process. My brother flew in from Chicago. He and I had a long, separate conversation that I'll keep private, but it ended with both of us deciding that 11 years of distance was enough. Are we a perfectly healed family now? No. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that a few days in a hospital erased 20 years of damage. It didn't. We're a work in progress. We talk on the phone now. They visited Seattle in the spring. It's careful and sometimes awkward and occasionally painful. But it's real. And real is enough. So here's what I actually learned from all of this. And I mean actually learned, not the inspirational poster version. The first thing, failure is information, not identity. I didn't fail at becoming a doctor. I discovered, the hard way, through a painful and expensive detour, that I was meant to build the room where doctors do their work. That's not failure, that's redirection. The problem was nobody around me knew the difference. The second thing, the people who hurt us are almost always people who were hurt first. That doesn't excuse what they did. My parents were wrong. What they did caused real damage that took years to work through. But understanding where it came from meant I didn't have to carry their story as my own. The third thing, building something real, something that outlasts your anger, your grief, your need for validation, that's the only revenge worth having. I didn't build that hospital to prove my parents wrong, but I won't pretend it didn't matter standing there watching my father read my name on that wall. It mattered. And then it transformed into something else entirely. And the last thing? It is never too late to find your way back to the people you love, even after years, even after real harm. If there is still love underneath the damage, it's worth seeing if it can breathe again. My father called me last week. He didn't need anything. He didn't have news. He just called. He said, "I was thinking about you. I wanted to hear your voice." 20 years of silence. And now, he calls just to hear my voice. If this story reached something in you, if you've ever been told you weren't enough by someone who was supposed to love you, I want you to know something. Their verdict was not final. It never was. You get to write